This is Comic Shenanigans, episode 1072, Book of the Month Club, Marvel Holiday Edition.
Ain't no stopping them shenanigans. Love getting into shenanigans. All up in them shenanigans. 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 Shenanigans.
Welcome to the Comic Shenanigans. This is episode 1072. It's our Book of the Month Club as we take a look at some Christmas tales from Marvel past. I'm your host, Adam Chapman. I'm joined, as always, by my Book of the Month co-hosts, Nathan Struck and Paul Skorez. Good evening, gentlemen. How are you both?
I'm festive and happy.
Festive and happy.
All right, so this is we're taking another break from Clones. We've taken a bunch of breaks, but this time we're going back in time, and we're going to experience some holiday tales from the Marvel Comics universe. I'm excited for this because I think Paul hasn't read many of these, if any of these. I know that Nate probably had read some of these, but let's go back first to I guess 1980, and we've got Uncanny X-Men 143, which is notable for a few things. First of all, on a previous episode that we did when we talked about Alpha Flight for our Canada Day episode, we were only on Uncanny X-Men 140, and we're skipping two issues, 141 and 142, two of the most influential issues of Uncanny X-Men, by the way, Days of Future Past, and we're jumping into A Christmas Tale with Kitty Pryde. So I want to know, Paul, you first, because I don't think you've ever read this stuff before. Uncanny X-Men 143, Kitty's left alone at the Xavier Mansion. Had you ever read this before?
No.
Did you like it?
Well, I fell asleep through it at one point because, man, Claremont, because I was smashing through a bunch of these issues kind of in one sitting as best I could. And okay, yeah, there wasn't a lot of content to get through for the podcast, and it's okay, I don't mind you kind of, giving more detail to what I'm looking at in the art, but man, to understand the Kelvin to which the heat of the fire is a little excessive for me. But I will say this was a very Claremontian book, I guess. It seemed to be the least Christmas focused of all the books, because you have this poor Jewish girl fleeing for her life from this rude / xenomorph looking creature. The book starts kind of weird with Storm getting stabbed in the chest by this energy spear, and she's fine. And it leads to these aliens going away, and this other creature comes out of the Earth for no reason, and attacks it was a very haunting issue. When the two civilians looking to cut down a Christmas tree get mauled, obviously we see pointless slasher style death in comics everywhere, but because Claremont put that text in of, it's their first Christmas together, and I gave these characters, I guess, almost a little bit of backstory, I felt really bad for them. They got slashed and destroyed by this alien, and then there's this creature who's able to attack and actually hurt Kitty was very fascinating, and she she's usually pretty invincible with her phasing powers, right? So almost nothing stopped this creature until she launches the X-Jet afterburners at its face and barely survives that as it melts to ash. There's your synopsis, everybody. Spoiler alert. But again, the only Christmas part about it, I guess, her parents come at the end saying, "Hey, here we are to spend the holidays with you." But a very kind of dark, alien manhunt issue, which was a very interesting take by Claremont, I guess, here. But I guess something to help build Kitty's character and bravery and her adaptability, and she the character we know of her today, right? So kind of the beginnings of kind of the trials and tribulations she'll go through to be a successful X-Man in the future.
I will say one thing I forgot to mention as well. This is the last issue of the fabled Claremont Byrne team. So Claremont and Byrne really brought this book to new heights. Byrne worked on a lot of the big stuff. He worked on Dark Phoenix Saga. He worked on Proteus. He worked on Days of Future Past. This is his last issue with Claremont. But it's interesting because you don't feel like he didn't phone it in at all. Like, he really, gave you a full tour de force experience. As you said, like, it really, if you gloss over a little bit of the Claremont stuff and just kind of, take it a little bit quickly, the art tells a great story. Again, it's a very intimate story because it's just Katie on the run trying to figure out what to do, and it's really putting her through its paces. And at this point, the character's been around, maybe 12 issues, but she hasn't really had a lot of focus just for her. So this is her coming out party, and the shot of her kissing Colossus is a very famous one and is often reprinted, and you see it everywhere. And so that's where this moment happens. Again, she's like, 13? And he's like 17, 18? But so we don't think about that part, but this is the kind of the beginnings of that romance as well.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. Yeah, here's a kiss for you, sexy. Yeah, so they do hanker to that, and it's astonishing, and it's in a number of issues that they go back to that. So yeah, that was cool to kind of see that for the first time too. I agree.
Now, Nate, you had read this before, correct?
Yep.
What was your take on it? Did you enjoy it?
Yep.
Man, a few words.
Great colors. Who's on colors for this issue? Let's find it. See if you can give it a look while I'm just kind of looking back over the issue, Adam.
Sure.
Oh no, here it is. It's Glynis Ween.
Yes.
So is that Len Ween's spouse or partner or brother or sister? I don't know Glynis. I don't know if there's a gendered name at all, but
I actually don't know. I've never really thought about that fully, but I'll definitely give that a check.
The page just before the splash for the title card, fantastic. With I like how Paul called it a xenomorph. This is an alien story for sure. I mean, this is 1982, right? And so 79, I think, is Alien. It's also a Black Christmas. I'm vibe, like 1974, considered by many people like the first slasher film, which actually is a Canadian film.
Mm-hmm.
A bunch of sorority sisters get attacked at Christmas time. So that's the thing about Claremont. Like, a lot of it is just seeing his influences. Like, and he wears them on his sleeve quite often, even down to like Alien in the first Alien movie. Ripley jettisons. It's not really. I guess it's not really an airlock outside into space, right? And then the alien gets burnt up in the I don't know what they're called, the jets, right? So that's kind of here as well. But great colors of this like creature, this demon attacking the couple with the blood red moon. Really evocative, great horror stuff. The title page or the title card on the splash of the demon crawling over this desiccated, disgusting, almost scab-like demon. Text by Byrne is really incredible. Again, very like Alien-esque. Reminds me almost of what's the TurboGrafx or PC Engine game, Alien Crush. Mm-hmm. Really, really nice kind of. And I don't know that Alien Crush comes out after this anyway, so it's not. I don't think that's an inspiration. But just like a lot of great visuals, Adam. I really feel that you're right. Showing off Kitty's abilities in the danger room, that she's also a gymnast. So this is really celebrating her, but then also for people who are entering into this comic and getting to know her. She's really likable as always. And I do agree, Paul, that making her at least harmed a little bit, this is a threat. Like, it's establishing the demon as certainly a threat for a character that is known for being unharmable or untouchable. And then they take you through, the danger room like Claremont always does. He uses the danger room heavily, regularly, especially to introduce people to power sets. So it's kind of got everything, right? You've got a taste of the different characters, or they touch on them, some of their relationships. And then it's also a coming of age, right? And she passed the tests, right? This is her tour de force. Welcome to the X-Men, Kitty Pryde. Hope you survive the experience. So it's just a really solid issue. I think it's well known. I hear people talking about it fairly regularly. Great issue.
It's interesting looking at it again. I had forgotten that the first 3 pages were unrelated, but like a flashback, because I opened it up. I'm like, wait, I'm pretty sure Kitty's alone. So how's Storm here? I forgot. And then I actually, it's nice to have the Epic collections where you see them reference, for details, see X-Men 96. So I went back and saw this whole sequence, and I'm like, man, Claremont just drops this like nothing. And then comes back to it 47 issues later. Like, that's a Claremontism if I've ever heard of one. Like,
he put it in his notebook, right? And he just kind of was like, I'll get to it later. And then they're like adding ideas. And we know that Byrne eventually becomes a co-plotter, right? Mm-hmm. So they just, apparently, I'm just guessing, but I guess I got to read those notebooks. They just kind of get going. And maybe at some point he's like, oh yeah, by the way, I want to come back to this, right?
And yeah, so it's interesting. And again, what I like about it is that I didn't feel like I missed anything. It was nice to have the footnote. But again, it was nice to be like, if I want to go back and read that, I could, but I also didn't feel like I missed anything. And that's something that Claremont does a lot of. He gives you everything you need. You don't feel like you missed anything. You got a whole, even though you only get 3 pages, you feel like you get the brunt of it, which really is all it really was anyway. But it's interesting to like have that kind of setup. I also like the small touches before the X-Men actually leave, like they're all going to go out for the evening, and, Wolverine and Mariko, like there's a lot of character stuff, even though the brunt of the issue is just on Kitty, even having Scott Summers meets Lee Forrester, which is a pretty big deal in his life. Deal. And it just kind of happens in this issue. So there's actually a lot going on. And as you said, like this is her coming of age. This is setting Kitty on the path that'll eventually be the Kitty and Wolverine miniseries, where she really takes a big step forward in terms of being a superhero. What I do think is so comical about it is that she does all this. She breaks a lot of stuff, right? Like she trashes the Danger Room. She, fries the Blackbird, all this stuff. And she's just chilling out after, like, what? Did she just have, like, a shower at the end? And, like, she's just hanging there, and everyone gets home. She's like, oh, hey, everybody. And then...
it's like Home Alone. Like, Storm goes up, Kitty, what you doing in my room?
100%. Like, it's very comical. And I'm sure... I don't know if they ever touch on that, but I did really appreciate that. So yeah, but you're right, Paul. It's an interesting one because it's very clearly set at Christmas. They talk about it, but again, it's the Jewish girl home on Christmas. There's no real conversation about it, so it's interesting that like everything about the cover, Merry Christmas, everyone knows it as the Christmas issue of X-Men, and yet really has no connection. Whereas you have a few other issues where the first Return of the Sentinels, when you had the all different X-Men first go up against the Sentinels, that was against the backdrop of Christmas. They were, at the Rockefeller tree and everything, but there wasn't really a lot of focus on it. So that's why I picked this one as the quote-unquote Christmas X-Men issue, because it's well known as such, but you're right. It doesn't really feel like Christmas in the way that some of these other books will.
Nothing wrong with that. I like the variety it gives us.
Any other thoughts about this one? Because we have 4 other issues that are very different from each other to jump into. So any other final thoughts on this one? This is a huge moment for Kitty.
I'm good.
No, I covered all my notes. Yeah.
Got all your notes. All right. Now we're going to jump to 1988. We got Daredevil 253. This is Merry Christmas, Kingpin. So I'm most curious to hear from Paul. Because Paul is not usually known as being the biggest JR fan. This is with JR. JR is really kind of coming into his own. He's starting to develop the style that we know him for now, but he's really starting to pioneer it and move away from a style that was closer to his dad's, or at least like, in an early version of himself. This is him starting to come into his own. So I'm curious, like, you don't read a lot of Daredevil, so I'm curious what you thought of this at all. Like, were you kind of taken aback by, like, what is happening with Matt? Where is he? What's going on? Like, I'm very curious what your interpretations were, not just the art, but just really where this character is during this particular Christmas issue.
Sure, yeah. Like, I obviously know, high-level Daredevil, what he's all about, and some of his supporting cast, and, obviously him and the Kingpin, their long-standing kind of war against each other. To cover the art piece first, like, this was actually, not horrendous JR art.
High praise. 5 out of 5.
It was, yeah, right? It wasn't like, it's an 8. It wasn't like, total, like, all the really heavy scratchy or the sausage fingers, and reminds me of, some of the good Enemy of the State stuff, that I've enjoyed from him. So it was like, I think it suffered more from how it was colored. Like it was like someone went to MS Paint and just filled red. There was no like depth to the color or the shading necessarily, right? And I know you can speak from the time, I mean, it's an 80s comic, but you see that big green, muscle car right at the beginning with this crazy guy in his tongue lashing out all the time. These two goons just mauling people on the streets, just causing, quite the ruckus.
They're wild boys, Paul.
Wild boys. But it felt like a very, grounded, like he's a street level guy, so it's a very grounded issue in that sense. You got Kingpin losing his mind about Murdoch's done some shit to cause his organization some trouble, right? And he and the one assistant dude goes through this list of things. Murdoch did this and this and this, and Kingpin's like Murdoch, like just going nuts in his head. How do I get rid of this pesky lawyer, right? To a point where he's like, he actually looked pretty good in that workout scene where he's pumping iron and trying to swat a fly with these dumbbells and stuff like that. So, pretty intense scene there. And then JR's always been good at action shots, right? He's very kinetic in the way he there's a good scene of Daredevil doing a flip on the car and stuff like that. So, I think it wasn't like an eyesore, so to speak, outside. I think the coloration was just almost too bright for what they were trying to achieve. I will say that 8-Ball kid really annoyed the crap out of me. Like little punk kid just causing trouble, being a bully to that poor girl. But then I guess because there was a skateboard at the end, and a very true. Here's this jerk at the beginning of the story, and he kind of redeems himself at the end of the story. Christmas type of redemption arc, I guess, of things. So kind of very probably typical of times. So very cute in that sense, but the kid just annoyed me. I wanted him to get run over by the car at one point. I did notice there's one interesting scene though when
Merry Christmas.
When it's first sees Daredevil and he gets out of the costume before he goes to that shelter to check on everyone and give these gifts and stuff, but he is carrying a full-on Christmas tree over his shoulder like it's nothing. Like Daredevil's average strength is overpower 4, I think. I don't know if he's got the strength to do a full-on 6-foot tree over his shoulder like it's nothing.
He's Olympian level, right? He's Olympian level strength and stamina and stuff. So maybe,
like if Kingpin was holding that, sure. But just the way he's holding, the center of gravity on that thing is totally off. I thought that was pretty humorous to see.
He was on a rooftop too. He wasn't even on the ground. He was on a rooftop, just walking around with this tree,
carrying this tree, right? I thought that was kind of funny. But yeah, it was a cute little issue. It made me kind of curious, after reading that, okay, do I want to go back and read what Murdoch's doing to give Kingpin pause? Obviously, the next issue in the epic, I think we jump to Typhoid Mary and stuff like that. So, okay, some cool stuff there.
Well, anything that makes you interested in reading more Daredevil is a good issue for me. This is not long after Born Again, which is the big resetting of the Matt Murdock kind of mythos, where it kind of strips him down, and so this is an interesting turning point issue because it feels like this could have been filler, but really this is where Kim can finally realize as well, it's not enough that I took all this surface stuff. I have to strike at his heart, which really does lead into Typhoid Mary and a whole new campaign that he will wage war against Murdoch with. So this is actually a really impactful issue in that way, but at the same time, it's also really good done in one as well. You get a lot of you can really understand Murdoch's world. So even though you don't necessarily know what's going on, they give you everything you need. Nocenti reads her kind of wears her politics on her sleeve often, but this feels very much like this is New York of the 80s. It felt like you could feel this issue. The Wild Boys, kind of careening around, yes, obviously they're kind of dialed up to 11, but at the same time, it feels like, no, there probably were gang guys like this that were kind of rolling around, just kind of doing shit. And so it's nice to have Daredevil kind of stand up to them. Again, Daredevil is much more a man of the people here, because he's got a smaller clinic and, he's kind of helping people, but he's not a rich guy. He's not a high-paid lawyer. It's very different. And Kingpin can't really understand that himself, which is kind of nice to kind of see how divorced Kingpin is from the common man, that he just doesn't understand how it's possible that Matt Murdock is okay with this. I thought this was really entertaining issue. It's nice to see Murdoch, being a good guy. I actually liked 8-Ball. He is a little shit. But I guess that's kind of the point, right? Like, if you're a kid on the kind of living on the streets, so to speak, like, and they're all kind of, downtrodden, so to speak, and wanting other things, he looks up to the Wild Boys as being, well, they take whatever they want. I want to be like that. If you're a kid with nothing, it's understandable that why you might look up to something like that. And Daredevil's trying to kind of walk him away from that and give him a better example. And so he ends up giving his deck to Darla. So as much as he's a bit of a stooge about it, it is trying to show and model something different for this kid who otherwise would just be another thug. He could just be another wild boy if Matt Murdock isn't there to give him a better example. So I do like, it's an interesting era because you have these kids, which JR at times can draw good kids and sometimes can't. So it kind of goes back and forth. But I like that, again, it gives a different flavor to the book and really grounds the character in a different way. Nate?
I mean, I think you two have covered it pretty well. I really like how JR makes lights twinkle in the city. It's a great effect, and he uses it all throughout, especially this opening set of scenes. The lights reflecting off of all the glass in New York. This effect that he's going for, what it would be like to kind of, in the certain light or twilight, perhaps, look down a New York street. So I thought that was a really nice evocative effect throughout the issue. I like JR. I have no notes for him. This is a great issue for his work. I actually thought it was really restrained of Nocenti. She's often a really good critic or points out critiques of capitalism. And this is like very restrained Ebenezer Scrooge. Ebenezer Scrooge themes, of course, are going to come up in a number of these issues. Critiques of the bourgeoisie and exploitation of the working class and all this stuff. And so you get a little bit of that with Kingpin at the end, where he doesn't understand the value of a dollar, or he could care less. He's humbugging, right, in his limo at the end and stuff like that. He doesn't understand how, he's grinching as well, kind of looking out at these the people in the shelter, and there's, what is that line from the Grinch, right? Like, there's no. He's confused and bamboozled by he took away all their gifts, and yet he hears laughter anyway. Whatever. And again, like the snow falling and stuff like that's very evocative. So I like it in terms of its image, or its what it evokes through the images of the text. I also don't like 8-Ball. It's nice that Darla gets something, a somewhat positive ending. They said he does a very good job of like a little boy and a little girl who like each other, but the little boy is only able to kind of express himself through violence. That old classic thing of like, oh, I put a worm in her hair and she yelled at me. I don't understand why. And like, well, it means he likes you. Like that's a cute, like, actual connection to real humanity that Nocenti's putting in here. But yeah, this attempt, and Marvel has a long history of this. Stan was doing this, right? Like, with the Newsboys or something like that? Like, oh no, it wasn't Newsboys. There's a ham radio team. Remember that?
Yeah.
A bunch of college-age kids. They have a name, right? And like, they're helping.
Yeah, are you talking about the ones with Rick Jones that he was part of?
Rick's part of that. Yeah, and Wyatt Wingfoot as well, right? Like, they're college-age kids that are on the ham radio, and they'll help Marvel heroes, and they'll put the call out, right? And they're like looking off the rooftops and like, hey, you see that? See this? They do it again. Like Superman has something similar, right? In like the Triangle era, and I hate them. They're part of this. They're cloned versions of like the directors of that. What's the facility called? That organization called?
Cadmus.
Yeah. Say it again?
Cadmus.
Cadmus. Yeah, so the Cadmus de-aged boys, and they're all like, hey, what's up, wise guy? We're the Cadmus boys, and we're on the job, right? That whole thing. Just getting essentially newsies, right? They're just like kids from the street who know the street and can be these, I guess this entree for the common man, which is wild for Cadmus. Like, to have like, we're like billionaire CEO clone versions of those guys who also are street talking wise tough guys who live in a lab. But then you've got like Wyatt Wingfoot, and Rick Jones, and then here you've got these boys, and also to some degree this is like what the Power Pack are, right? These kids that are street level that are going to be having their own adventures. We're going to Goonies it up while I'm reading the comic for the main characters, right? So I've never really connected with these street level kids. Maybe if I was a New Yorker, I would feel better about it or stronger about it. So there's a nice message there. It's a fine issue. It's not my favorite of these issues. But it's pretty solid. I mean, I'm done.
What I think is interesting about it too, well, first of all, it's got a very iconic cover. Like, that cover was even used as the back cover for the Epic collection, so it's a very iconic cover with Kingpin, holding the Daredevil mask. But what I think interesting about it as well is that ostensibly the villains of the piece are the Wild Boys, but they get maybe 5 pages worth of this issue, and they're really a non-factor. Like, they're just kind of there. Daredevil shows up and immediately chokes them out. They're done.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because it is such much more of a character-centric issue, whereas we just read an action-packed issue of Uncanny X-Men where it was all about Kitty being on the run and trying to figure, live by her wits, try to survive this unspeakable, alien demon. And this one is very different. It's very character-centric. We have very little actual action, but there's still a lot going on that keeps you interested in reading more and reading this issue. So, yeah, I really enjoyed this. I would say for JR's kind of tenure on Daredevil, this is much more restrained than he will get. It's interesting to see this interpretation of Kingpin as being so big. It's not as big as the Sienkiewicz version that we see in Into the Spider-Verse, but you can see it starting to kind of lend itself into that direction.
I will say the antagonist beyond the Wild Boys, Paul already brought up. Basically, it's Wild Boys and Fly. It's just like kind of, with a little bit of like.
I mean, the Fly gets a lot of airtime, right? Like pages.
Yes. Oh, nice pun, Adam. Very good.
All right, are you ready for 1989?
I'm going to bug you again. What's the name of the organization in the Triangle Era? Erasmus?
Cadmus.
I'm just messing with you.
And wasn't it the Newsboy Legion?
I think that's right. That sounds familiar, yeah.
So we're going to go to Amazing Spider-Man 314. This is from 1989. The non-mutant superhero. And so this is a very
that
famous...
was one of my notes.
This is a very famous cover with Spider-Man being kicked out of his apartment. MJ's just looking kind of dejected, and there's being a Santa on the corner who's a little bit surprised by the fact that they're being kicked out. And as well on the little icon in the corner box, we got Spider-Man wearing a Santa hat and holding up a little present. So I'm curious. I don't know who wants to go first, but I guess I'll ask Paul. Paul, have you ever read this issue before? No. Okay. And Nate, have you read this issue before?
Paul answers like that's preposterous. It's preposterous you would read a McFarlane Spider-Man issue?
It's not preposterous. I guess that I wasn't quite there yet, right?
How do you feel about McFarlane Spidey? I mean, you're familiar with it. You've seen it most of your life, I'm sure, on like different memorabilia or paraphernalia.
Yeah, you have the obviously some of the famous covers from his run. I had what was known as like the McFarlane Marvel Legends Spider-Man for quite some time that I sold for pretty good money. So yeah, I'm quite familiar with that. You can tell, especially the way he does the eyes.
Do you like his
tell?
You like his take?
I'm okay with it. I didn't like reading it, kind of looking at it, and you could see, it had almost kind of an image book feel. His art style. Because not having read any of it till I've only seen his stuff more after he jumped ship and did Image and Spawn and stuff like that. I can see how the connection there, I guess.
I'm a huge fan of it. Like I know that's like nothing to say. Like okay, whatever. He's widely considered to be one of the top artists for Spider-Man, and still is to this day. Mm-hmm. But when I was deciding to go in on Spider-Man Epics, I was just like, I am going to absolutely collect certain artists. That's kind of my main focus and eras. And so McFarlane was a no-brainer for me. I'm avoided Larson. I'm in on Bagley. Like there's just certain, there's something about it. So I have not read this issue before, Adam, but I enjoyed it. And I mean, I have these collections. I have the Epics with his run-in. I just haven't gotten around to reading them. So it was just a matter of time. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I love the art in it. I love his, of course, the webbing is something he's noted for. Even this image of Spidey, a purse snatcher, and just this incredible. It's a medium-sized panel too. It's not a splash, but it consumes the whole page of him just lashed between these two trees in a full spider's web. Absolutely excessive, right? Most other artists would just kind of put him in a little satchel or tie it up together in a little bassinet or something like that, or wrapped up in a spider formation, kind of like prey. And McFarlane's like, I'm not just going to show you that there are trees here and draw the bark on the trees and the shrubbery. I'm going to do the entire spider's web. And he's also like one of the fastest artists at Marvel at the time, too. He's doing all of this like high speed. Because he's doing 2 books a month at one point, right? Is it now?
I don't know if it's yet.
No, I guess they would say on the cover, they would be like by monthly or bi-weekly or whatever, right?
And even then, it was only ever like a summer stunt, I think. It was never like a prolonged thing. It was short bursts, but yeah, I mean, yeah, he is very fast. What blows me away, and I always forget.
He's inking his stuff, too.
Yeah, well, yes, he's doing that, but also just how tight and how much detail he gets into some of these pages, which is unnecessary. Like, not in this issue, but there's one issue where Spider-Man's at Peter Parker is at like a grocery, like a small little fruit market. And the level of detail is so excessive. Like, you don't need that much detail, but it grounds you in the image. It feels like a real place. It feels like it's lived in. And I feel like as we move out of the 70s and 80s, less and less artists start using actual photo reference. Like, you have guys like Ross Andrew who would go around with taking pictures of everything in New York, and so everything felt like New York. It was real New York because he had so much photo reference. And as years have gone on, people use less and less detail. Whereas McFarlane is still peppering everything with so much detail. It feels very lived in. Yep. The panels feel very dense. They feel very like there's a lot of... It's not extra line work like you would see in a Jim Lee piece where you'd have so much extra lines on a face. He's just spending time on backgrounds and doing all this stuff that most people don't even bother to do anymore. And this is a reference more for you, Nate, than Paul. But on page 80 of the Epic Collection... there's a shot of Spider-Man swinging, and I'm pretty sure that was like the first card in the Spider-Man card series. I think Spider-Man card series 2. It was mostly McFarlane pieces, and I see this page, and I'm like, that's that card. Like, it's so gorgeous. So much of his art is just beautiful to look at. The story is interesting because Michelinie really is a bit of a chameleon in that he figures out what his artist wants to do, and he figures out how to marry what he wants to do with that artist. And so when he writes with Larson, the stories are very different than when he's doing it with McFarlane. So I'm curious what you thought about the writing here, because the art is great. But what did you think of the writing? And I'm going to start with Nate.
Oh, I just kind of make one more comment about the art.
Yeah, of course.
In that montage section where he's going around trying to find a place to stay for him and MJ, even like it's a panel. It's a page of 6 panels. It's not a big panel, but back to what you were saying about how much he's cramming in there unnecessarily. There's this, MJ's getting into a cab, and I'm trying to show it to you two. It's just like crammed full of detail, and it looks like New York. Like, these are shots that look like it's very situated in place, and it's been said a million times that New York really is a character, should be. And any good story about the city, it really is its own character, and some of the best texts show that, and they make you feel like you belong there. That's massive for me for Marvel Comics. Some of my favorite memories of getting into them or reading them not only was the interconnected universe, but it was the feeling of place and the sense of place, right? And so that character is really... It's oozing out of the page here, especially just kind of the 80s feel, particularly the 80s New York. And again, I love that. One of the things I love about I'm sorry, I'm going to go on a wee tangent here. The first Ninja Turtles movie. Love it, still to this day. I know that there's a nostalgia to it, but I can look at it too, and there are lots of great technical things about that film. And New York is absolutely a character there, and you get it from the very beginning, right, with the burglaries, the crime spree, and you just get to see the city and live in the city and the steam from the sewers and so forth. Okay, so in terms of story, sorry about the art thing. I also enjoy the story here. Again, there's a lot here. Michelinie's doing a lot of work here about like almost every page. There's a conversation around class. Peter and MJ are kicked out because someone is like abusing power, and you're picking on the little guy, and they literally cannot find a place to stay. And so there's also like the nativity kind of thing here, but like there's no room in the inn. Where can we find a place to stay on Christmas time? So he's kind of merging these two kind of themes together. J. Jonah Jameson's often seen or often used as the humbug character here, but even he has some like redeeming quality, right? Doesn't he give him more money or something, a bonus or something for his pictures, or no?
I think so.
Yeah, something about that. Or he wishes him well at the Christmas party. Like he's not actually as curmudgeonly as he could be. But again, there's lots of conversations around money and when you're owed.
He tells him to enjoy the Christmas party because it's a deductible.
Yeah, right. So there's the
Christmas bonus is in the other Spider-Man issue. By the boots. Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I conflated the two. But then there's a whole the antagonist here, the conflict here is also about being getting the shaft or being shortchanged or someone is taking more than their share, which again is both Christmassy with the Scrooge kind of sub theme, but Michelinie, this is not the only time he does this, right? So again, it ends in a very heartfelt way. There's a very human story here. There's time for Uncle Ben. There's time for Aunt May. There's time for reflection with Peter realizing, what he has in life, how lucky he is. I think at one point someone calls him, I said, Aunt May is the happiest person. And MJ goes, and the second happiest, I'm really proud of you. So you get to see how they love each other, how lucky they are to have each other. So there's a very nice, and it's not schmaltzy. It's not ham-fisted. It's not gross. It's just you get a feeling of Peter's growth. He realizes that it's okay to ask Aunt May to stay with them. This isn't a failing. It starts off with this kind of hyper-individualism. Mm-hmm. I'm grown up, and a grown-up can never show their weakness. They can never go, in his words, going back. I don't want to go backwards. And then he realizes that, no, this is actually forward. And it's okay for at least a time to stay with Aunt May. So, I think it's a beautiful issue, actually, in many ways. I really enjoyed it.
It's probably the most Christmassy of the bunch because it has that kind of family dynamic and Christmas Miracle-esque type of situation where they were dumped on the street and now at first Peter's like, I don't know what we're gonna do. We'll figure it out. You got a poor kid on the street saying, "What about my Transformers?" Probably my favorite part of the issue. Nice little reference to, of course, Marvel has a license probably at the time still. Yeah. It was it was really cute, and in the end, you go home where it's safe and with family, with Aunt May at the end. So it was good there. But you brought it up kind of at the beginning there, Adam. I did note the non-mutant superhero piece there. Was there a particular story behind why they threw that on the cover? Because mutants were the bee's knees, they were trying to kind of cause some separation for readers who weren't aware of that. No one's ever thought Spider-Man's a mutant, so it's interesting that they would brand it that way.
I think it's just more because the mutant books were so big that they would do this on Spider-Man for a while. It was just this tongue-in-cheek thing that they did on the book. I'm curious, now that you mention it, now that we're talking about it, I'm curious, was that a Jim Salicrup idea? Was it just him being a smartass? I don't know. And I would love to know now. I should email him and see if he answers, but I'd be very curious now to know what was the origin of having that on the book.
Yeah, it seems very intentional, right? So I'm really curious to know what the deal was behind it, right?
To me, it was this is my guess, and again, I'm interested to hear the actual answer, but I thought when I saw it, again, mostly through collection of Epic collections, is that they wanted to get mutant on the title. Because if you could mutant on the title page, it's going to get someone's attention. And it's not super big, but it is colorful, and it is at the top. It is actually above the title. And so I see the tongue-in-cheek thing there too, right, Adam? This is not a mutant book. But mutant is still on the title, right? So New Mutants is on the stands, and X-Men's on the stands, and if you're going there and you're looking for mutant stuff, and again, it's the biggest comic in the industry, they got mutant on there anyway. I think that I would be interested to know if they noticed even a little bit of a boost in sales, and if they went, okay, I don't know for sure, this could be correlation, not causation, but here, it doesn't cost us anything to do it, so let's just kind of keep doing it. That's my thought.
Was you for Spider-Man, though, out of all the heroes to throw that on? I think Spider-Man's probably still doing fine at the time, even if mutants are the most popular thing, no?
Yeah, you think so, but
it's interesting. So on 3, I'm holding the Epic in my hand, so I have limited ability to quickly check. But in 312, it says the non-mutant superhero. 313, the non-mutant superhero. But one of them, I think, it actually starts to adapt it and say something a little bit different. Let's see here.
I would imagine that there's an aspect of this that is competition. These are the two biggest offices, really, in terms of the sales for Marvel. Spider-Man is going to sell. And if at any point X-Men was stealing their thunder, or it was overselling Spider-Man, certainly before McFarlane comes on the book, right?
Yeah.
So this might be a little bit of a friendly rivalry. Like, we'll do anything to get our numbers up.
So it looks like it continues to be the same until 317. 317, it says the world's greatest comic magazine, and then you see a thing in the corner saying, "Hey." So it's definitely like tongue-in-cheek fun that they're just kind of messing around. Then it goes back to the non-mutant superhero with 318. So they really like just doing that. And then 319 here, it's the non-mutant misadventures of Amazing Spider-Man, which is
okay.
Interesting. Then they stop because it becomes part of a crossover, the Assassination Nation. Not crossover, sorry, multi-part storyline. So I'm curious if they go back to it. I think they do, but...
You call it Assassination Nation?
Yes.
It's Assassination.
Well, what did I say? Sorry, hold on.
Oh, it may be a small guffaw. I don't think you probably intentionally said it that way. Yeah, because that's the whole point. That's the pun, right? That it's assassination.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. That's supposed to be the fun of it, I suppose.
Well, that was a weird guffaw. You got me.
Okay.
They got me.
Yeah, gotcha. Hey, Paul, gotcha. We got him. We finally got him. Made one slight mistake, and then he goes like, "Nah, no, I didn't really mean that." But we count it. That's a happy Christmas for us. That's our gift.
All right.
Thus far, in these 3 issues we've read so far, we've really had a murderer's row of artistic talent because we got John Byrne.
Yep.
We had JR really at the peak of really like figuring out who he was before he became too stylized, and now we have McFarlane really at the upswing like of his popularity. So it's really interesting to see what we've been able to see so far is that these have all been these holiday issues, but just by happenstance we got to see some murderer's row of talent so far.
Yeah, that's a good combo with Assassination, Murder's Row. You're really hitting the spirit of Christmas here with these word choice. I love it.
All right. Any final thoughts about this particular issue of Amazing Spider-Man? Actually, I guess I should ask. Well, when that's not next, Paul. Nate, that's afterward.
What we're doing? Is this? Where's the Spider-Man next Spider-Man issue? Is this not before?
It's a few months before the Uncanny.
Oh, it's a few months before. So I'll go to Spider-Man.
Or like a month before. Like it's like the same time.
All right, I got excited for Uncanny 341, but I think ending with Uncanny 341 is really good.
I think it'll make you happier.
I don't hate this issue. I think 420 is fun.
Okay, well, before we get there, so Paul, which interesting, so you read the Daredevil issue and you're like, oh, I'm kind of interested to maybe see what happens next. How did you feel about this issue of Amazing Spider-Man? Did it make you feel like you want to go back and read more of the McFarlane stuff? Am I lending you some trades on Sunday? Like, where are we at with how you felt about this particular issue of Amazing Spider-Man?
Oh, well, nothing came out of that particular issue from a story lens that drove me in any direction, right?
Okay. Not
Same
like Daredevil.
way that you had in the Daredevil, right? Yeah, because the Daredevil, like, you know, that you had some good beats. This was a very, like, I don't know, by the numbers Spider-Man story, right? Parker luck, not working out. There's no real crazy. There's nothing really even the shadows bubbling up. Like, this is just kind of apart from the course, you know, very Peter-centric where they are right now. But you've kind of seen this before type of deal, right? So it's not like, you know, you see some, you know, the Kingpin or Green Goblin, you know, like starting to, you know, hatching a plot in the background somehow. Right, because even as we pivot to this new ASM issue, right, you have the Roses involved, right, and you have these two weird villains kind of hustling in the streets with Spider-Man and X-Men both oblivious to anything happening, which I didn't like because it was like there was zero connection to the heroes. It felt like this had nothing. Like there was a little bit of Civil War action here. It ends with a very gruesome, like if you watch the movie Seven, Head in a Box, you know, thing of it all. It was like okay, like I like it from a sense that you had these two heroes get together, right? And they even like Nate kind of even flats out says like, all right, can we just skip the obligatory like hero battle. Like we don't have to fight. Like we're cool. Like I get that you're Spidey. I can read your mind. And he's like, yo, bro, that's not like the telepathic etiquette here. Can you not do that? And I guess they had Christmas in the Age of Apocalypse. I don't know if that's somehow hardwired into Nate, because he gives him this gift of kind of closure for the baby situation that just happened, right? With the Aunt May kind of telepathic visions, kind of a gift for Peter to give him some closure. So I thought that was a sweet moment. But considering they were complete strangers, it was kind of, where does that even come from? But I guess, looking into his mind, he wanted to, be thoughtful. Like, okay, it was an interesting flex. But this is probably my least favorite of the bunch that we went through. Like, because it was just, again, it was kind of a weird, meeting of two very different heroes, random shenanigans in the background. That maybe there's more Rose stuff that comes out of that further down in the writing in that story if it goes through the epic more, I guess, sure. But it didn't seem very a little all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. So that was my take on that particular issue.
So a couple of things. So this is Amazing Spider-Man 420 that we're talking about now. It's a cover date February 97, so it would have come out Christmas 96. So actually, Nate, technically we could have done either first, because both it and Uncanny came out in the same month, which is kind of crazy because they feel so different from each other. Artistically, the story-wise, like they feel like they're from different periods, not the same month, which is really interesting. I have a very rosy glasses when I look at this issue. I can't divorce myself from nostalgia, because I started buying Amazing Spider-Man on a regular basis with 419, which would have been 1 month before this. So this is at the beginning of me being like, oh, I'm an X-Men fan. I've been buying X-Men for the last 6 or 7 months. I was in the hospital. I was, I can't remember, one of my many head injuries as a child. So I was in the hospital and someone brought me Amazing Spider-Man 419. I think it was... actually, it might have been a birthday present right after I got out of the hospital, now that I think about it. But I remember loving 419 and being like, you know what? I'm going to buy the next issue when I see it on the newsstand, which is what I did. And so I have 420 for that reason. And then I haven't stopped buying Amazing Spider-Man since. So I often say that X-Men made me a comic book fan, but Amazing Spider-Man kept me in comics. So this is important to me as a young fan, because I would have been 13 years old and really enjoyed this. So it's really hard for me to be objective, because I have so much, little kid, or not little kid, but 13-year-old kid energy coming into this issue in terms of how I enjoy it and how I appreciate it. It is interesting to reread it, because it's very much a classic kind of DeFalco issue where there's a lot going on that has nothing to do with the main Peter line. Like there's subplots, there's characters, as you said, that are having their own fight. Like the major fight of the issue isn't really with Peter. It's with El Nuno or El Uno or whatever his name is and Delilah. But I like those characters, so I was okay with it. The art is extremely stylized. We go from something like McFarlane, which was stylized but like more of a heightened reality, to this is just like the faces are crazy. They're very cartoony. I kind of like it anyway, but I also wonder, like, why did DeFalco include X-Men at all? Did he just call up Steve and say, hey, Steve, you were the creator of X-Men. Do you want to bring him into Amazing Spider-Man now? Like, there's no reason otherwise to bring this character in. And suddenly they're friends, and they're going to be friends for a few issues, and then they're never going to hear from each other again. But it's an interesting choice, and it's putting Spider-Man with someone who he's never met before, very different from him, occupies a completely different space. There's that big double-page splash where you see the Age of Apocalypse mentioned, which is really interesting as well, which, again, if you're a Spider-Man reader, you're like, what the fuck is this? Like, this is a world I don't understand. Like, it's so different. But maybe it's those blending of those tastes that I really liked as a kid, because I was an X-Men fan coming into Spider-Man, so I'm curious as to why I like it as much as I do, and it's interesting to hear your guys' much more sobering thoughts on it, because obviously you guys are coming in it very differently. It's in the middle of, as I said, a big plot line with the Rose and the Black Tarantula, and that's going to be an escalating conflict that we see. It only started in the issue before. Like, it just started, but it becomes like a defining element of this particular run by Tom DeFalco. So, Nate, what are your thoughts?
I read this a few months ago, or maybe even last year, as part of my quest to just read X-Men, as ill-advised as that might be. I know, to be honest, I have enjoyed it. I have enjoyed it more than I haven't. And so this was one of the issues that is a two-parter with, because X-Man will have Peter appear in his book as well. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they become like bros. And for Steve Skroce or Skroce, again, I don't really know the pronunciation. I've only read it. This is a good issue too. Again, I like him. I like his work as it develops in X-Man way more than the AOA stuff. One of my favorite drawings of Spider-Man is in this issue, which is also giving very much Joe Madureira. This is a very Maddie, and this is before Mad will draw Spider-Man, as I recall. This is a shot I'm showing of Nate and Spidey jumping off a building, and absolutely unnecessarily, Peter's doing a double web line, one hand behind his back. Yeah, so stylized, and it's colored really well. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'd like a picture of that maybe somewhere, like as a trading card, or maybe even as a poster. It's really, really fun.
It almost feels like a Joe Bennett piece. It almost feels like a Joe Bennett Spider-Man. Like I could see a Joe Bennett Spider-Man doing that. But yeah, no, it's a beautiful shot.
Or even a bit of McGinnis. There's like a bit of McGinnis in there too.
I actually thought you were going to mention the when you were talking about a very stylized kind of almost Joe Mad Spider-Man. I thought you were going to say the first shot we really see of Spider-Man with the "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" shot where it's on the title card. It's a very stylized shot of Spider-Man kind of crouched over wearing the Santa hat, but it's really cool and I like it. And it almost feels like it isn't Skroce, but it is. But it's an interesting shot. A lot of interesting art here and choices.
Some of the legwork or the definitions on the musculature of the legwork is giving a bit of Wieringo as well. Like the face isn't Wieringo, but like there's aspects of the anatomy that are giving a little bit of Wieringo. So like Skroce is doing his thing. He's evolving again. He's playing with style, and there's little touches that I feel familiarity with certain other artists, which is nice. Again, lots of creativity. The standoff of Peter and Nate. There's this. I guess it would be a Dutch angle. I don't know if you can see it here. They even like the curvature. Oh no, it's more like a fisheye. He's playing with fisheye.
Yep.
You know, you don't see a lot of. Adam Kubrick really loves playing with fisheye angles or lenses, as it were. So there's variety here. There's a lot of like really surprising. There's some surprising panels. I like Delilah because of Bagley, right, introducing her, and then you've got the Starking letters where you talked about in podcast episodes, Adam, and how that's unique and fun for a character that really kind of doesn't even deserve how fun that is. So there's just like there's stuff that if you're looking for it and you know it's a DeFalco issue, that it's kind of a lot of fun. And of course, I would imagine, because Adam, we all know that you love a very meaningful and heartfelt story. You got two guys bonding, and then Nate he has no family, and he's invited over for Christmas Eve, and he tells Peter again, like, you're a very lucky man again. Like this, it's actually explicitly stated here, whereas in the McFarlane issue, it's heavily implied and indicated. But like, this is a guy without a family looking at a man and his wife who lost a kid, and you're still lucky, right? And then grants him this beautiful wish that he gets some closure with his dead aunt by kind of going into his mind while he's sleeping and giving him a beautiful moment. Like you really want to see Nate and Peter develop a relationship more, but you're right. Like there's not enough after this. Like this is an extremely meaningful thing to do for Peter. From a guy who's been tortured and traumatized his entire life and is just trying to kind of figure out after the age of apocalypse how to be a human being, and to connect enough with another guy who's lived a life of trauma and then give him this gift. Really beautiful. So I can see why you would connect absolutely to this. It's a very meaningful issue. Now, surprisingly, except for the villain stuff. You're right, Paul. The villain stuff doesn't really matter, and I'm not interested in it. And I guess there's the points taken off for that, but the hero stuff is fun.
So you're not interested at all in finding out what happens next with the Rose and his battle with the Black Tarantula?
Me?
Yeah.
I've read past this with X-Man, so no, I haven't. It wasn't enough to kind of go back and try to figure out the Black Tarantula stuff. No, but this was part of my X-Man journey, so I'm kind of going to keep doing that. but eventually maybe I'll get into this era of Spider-Man.
Did you read X-Men, Amazing Spider-Man 425 then? The big battle between a supercharged Electro and X-Man and Spider-Man?
Yeah, who's the artist on that?
I believe it's Skroce still.
Is it? So
it's
maybe not.
It's like 5
maybe
months
not.
later. Like it's pretty close by.
I've been trying to like do the X-Men appearances ultimately through reading X-Men. Like it'll tell you like, oh, there's a crossover with Cable next. Go to Cable.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if I've seen that, and maybe they just didn't mention it. And so yeah, I'll have to go find it.
It's possible. It's got some really beautiful art. But the whole concept there is that Electro has been supercharged. He's humbled Spider-Man, made him beg for his life, and then let him like
always
supercharged.
Supercharged.
Well, yeah. And then it's all up to Spider-Man having a special insulated suit, which has been in multiple video games now. And he teams up with X-Man to, take it to Electro, which is a fun issue. And really, X-Man should be able to shut him down in like 2 seconds. But, it's comics. That's not the way it goes. But I miss this weird fish out of water friendship between these two characters, which shouldn't work, but works better than it should. I like that we got this kind of brief, like, glimpses of them, like, we're on the bus together, or subway together, we're talking, now we're at dinner, like, juxtaposed with this fight that you guys aren't really invested in, but it's interesting to see how that develops, and you can see these guys starting to form a bond, and it's interesting to see X-Man operating outside of X space, because he doesn't get to do that very often. Like, typically, he kind of lives in the X-Men's ecosystem to a degree. He's on the periphery often and gets to kind of do his own thing, but he's not usually pollinating with anyone outside of the X universe. He's usually just creating characters for him to do things with, but not actually touch the rest of the Marvel universe. So it's interesting to see him actually connect with someone else, because it's not common. So
I'm done with the issue. It's. I think pick it up if you're at all inclined. Pick it up, or Marvel Unlimited. That's what I would That's what I would suggest to people who are interested right now.
For those who are interested in that particular issue, in a few weeks, Dan Gavosden of the Amazing Spider-Man podcast will be guesting on this show to talk about Amazing Spider-Man 426 to 428, which is the resurrection of Otto Octavius, who had been killed by Kane, which we've seen recently in our Book of the Month Club issues. Kane, killed Dr. Octopus. We got a new Dr. Octopus who was Carolyn Traynor, nowadays known as Lady Octopus, took over. So eventually Tom DeFalco thought it was stupid to kill off Dr. Octopus and didn't really agree with the idea. So one of the first chances he gets, he brings him back. It's always been one of my favorite resurrections because they didn't shy away from the fact that he did die, and he's brought back through an arcane, ceremony, which there's a lot of those in the Marvel Universe. Why not? It's a place where mystical things happen all the time, so they do bring back Doc Ock. So if people are interested in reading that stuff, read forward to 426 to 428, and in a few weeks I'll be talking about it on this podcast. But I won't subject you guys to that, as really it's the main event for Nate. We're going to talk about a very important issue of Uncanny X-Men that we've also always quite enjoyed. This is issue 341. Also came out with a cover date of February 97, which would have been on stands December 96. This is a very famous cover for a lot of people. Alone Against the Power of Gladiator. You have Cannonball versus Gladiator. A great cover, but also the more you look at it, the more you realize these characters are not facing each other at all. It's kind of a weird composition, but damn, it's Joe Mad, so it almost doesn't matter. So, Nate, why don't you start us off?
Wow, okay, what an honor. I'm a little overwhelmed. Actually, you know what? When I'm rereading this, it's actually been a while since I've read this. There's a part of me, okay, I love this issue, and I would like to also dissect it. I want to, point out things that are, contradictory or maybe even sometimes silly or stupid or confusing, but also praise it. So I really just wanted to say that, because if it comes across in any way, if I'm critical of this issue, I really don't. That's not my overall opinion or takeaway.
Okay.
I read this when it came out. I was collecting Uncanny regularly at the time. I was already in love with Joe Mad's art. And for me, all I really knew was Lobdell. Like, I had, of course, read, Mutant Genesis and stuff like that, some Claremont stuff, but really not many Claremont issues. And Mutant Genesis is really good. And, of course, Jim Lee. But it is really interesting now to I'm trying to be a Claremont archaeologist, right? I'm trying to collect every issue of X-Men that he ever put out. I had to get the omnibus of the Marvel DC omnibus, just at least for the Teen Titans X-Men story. There's more to enjoy in that omnibus, but to have that in print, some of the times we'll go and we'll just look through back issues of things, and sometimes I'm just trying to find crossovers on almost anything that won't ever be recollected. And so I'm sure there might be an issue or two of Claremont I'll never be able to actually have printed, but for the most part, the epics will allow me to kind of recapture that. So Lobdell comes onto the book, one of the highest selling book series for Marvel, or at least going back and forth with Spider-Man for that title. And Lobdell gets the lead. He becomes the new lead on the books of the writer. As the writer, he's the new Claremont. And so there's obviously this very Baroque way that Claremont will write, this very kind of almost sometimes overwrought, a little bit of purple prose. But when you see Lobdell attempt to mimic it, you can really, I can really appreciate Claremont more, right? So we've read a Claremont book, and now you read Lobdell, and he's trying to do things, but not as well. So even the issue opens up with Beast doing, and this is kind of a combo of Stan Lee, who would do this with Beast more so, overly, again, verbose, and a lot of alliteration and and so on to make it sound like he's really smart. This is actually very, very, very Stan Lee, right? And so it opens up with Beast yattering away, and then we get into relationship stuff with Rogue and Gambit. And the more I understand and learn about Rogue's personality in the Claremont years, again, Lobdell is trying to do a Rogue thing, but he doesn't have her voice almost at all. He barely has her personality, her spiciness, her love of breaking rules and all that stuff doesn't really come across in the same way. So this is kind of Rogue is actually way more Rogue, the Claremont Rogue in the animated series, than she is in a lot of the Lobdell stuff. So it begins right away with even Gambit kind of not being very Gambit-y. He's immediately kind of just giving up on Rogue's invitation to let's go hang out together while we're downtown, while we're in New York for Christmas. And he's all just no, mon cher, three's a crowd, I'm going to take off. He just kind of doesn't even fight for her. And she's mad, too. She just really wants to spend time with him. And they even do this little squiggle over her head. And Joseph kind of, has to kind of interject and go, hey, well, then... it wasn't even on the table. He wasn't even making a move for Rogue and going, hey, let's go hang out together. And then Remy backs off. Remy just decides for her that you're going to spend the day with Joseph. So that's also out of character for him. But anyway, it gets them where they need to be, which is... a date with Joseph or Magneto, a Magneto clone. I'll say clone Adam, even though Marvel doesn't want to. And so that's kind of this B story. Bishop bounces. He's just I'm not going to be in this issue. I'm okay. And then we get, again, a Cannonball who is maybe be channeling for the Claremont Cannonball, but this is not a Claremont Cannonball either. And then Trish, who is inexplicably here, goes off with Beast. So then this is a Cannonball issue, really. And I love the art when he goes to FAO Schwartz and that giant teddy bear and the kids with the guns. You can see Lobdell really doing maybe what Michelinie is doing which is an artist's writer, a writer who kind of goes, what do you want to draw? Or just draw whatever you want to draw. So there's a non-Mario in this. There's a non-Nintendo reference. There are non-Nerf guns. There's a lot of kind of nods to things that he loves. Even an employee hitting on Sam. And to me, as a teenage boy reading this, I'm just beautiful woman hitting on Sam. He's so dopey. He's so unaware. He can't even pay attention. And there's romance going on with Rogue and Joseph. So I'm kind of well, this is really fun. That's at least some of that romancy part of the X-Men series. And then Madureira, Mad wants to draw a different portal or teleportation kind of graphic than has been seen in other X-Men comics. So they just kind of write that in. Lobdell just puts that into the narration of Cannonball. Is it looks like a I'm not doing the right voice. Looks like a variation of some kind of teleporting power. That's it. Just explain it away. It's a big ball of pink, and then you have a frothy gladiator come flying through without a cape, but the cape will materialize because he's confident or whatever. And then, like, pardon my hands, ma'am. So there's even, like, a little bit of, like, I don't know, not TNA really, but, like, of groping going on. But it's okay because it's for safety. So that's kind of a weird thing that Lobdell puts in there. Blasts off, and then apparently this vector that Gladiator is on coming through this portal, he can alter it, right? Because, like, Cannonball's blasting up, so he just kind of alters his mid-teleport, slams into them. And then there's a fight, which doesn't make any... Like, once you get to the end of the issue, it's another one of these, like, classic they have to fight thing, because Gladiator will... Whatever's happening here with this exchange of grabbing Sam in the head, lifting him up, and going, like... I'm creator of the Royal Galactic House of the Sheer Empire. I came in search of the X-Men, and you will do. Really overly violent, unnecessary. By the end of the issue, he's like, actually, I really need your help. I'm going to, like, bow before Rogue and be like, please help us. We so desperately need you. And time is of the essence. Bro, time's not of the essence. You're, like, smacking this, like, 18-year-old around for, like, 6 pages. And again, like, there's some fun moments of, like, Cannonball saying, I gotta get out away from people. Xavier always told me, gotta go away from people. And then starts smashing through buildings where there are people. It's funny contradictions, I suppose. But, like, then you get, like, I'm doing a thing where I'm going over the whole issue, aren't I? I need to stop and, like, let people talk. I'm going to pause here and see if someone wants to talk about something.
I mean, you're nigh invulnerable when you're blasting.
He doesn't do that, though. He doesn't say the line. I know, I'm...
But we all know it.
At the time, too, like, this is... thank you for the go. This is a very, like, 90s depiction. X-Men does this. Claremont always wanted this, too. He's like, your costumes should always be changing and developing and keeping fashion. And so that when Silvestri comes on the book in the 80s, especially, and there's Paul Smith is doing this, too. And they're both, like, very fashion-centric artists. You'll see, like, even Rogue's costume evolves and changes, like, 4 times in the 80s. And some of the other characters are doing something similar. So Rogue is, like, friends, right? This is, like, something, like, there's a choker, so it's very 90s. The hair that's been done up, it's very almost like Courtney Cox kind of would have her hair done exactly like this at some point. Buffy the Vampire Slayer will have her hair done. Sarah Michelle Gellar, like, this is a very kind of, and even the clothes. So it's very situated in this 90s thing, which... is interesting to look back on, right? Because Rogue actually has very naturally curly hair, but it's super straight. The bangs have all been, like, perfectly, separated in a way that's very Friends. So they're having their date in the air, and there's this nice little moment where the carriage driver is like, so let me guess, you're mutants, right? Sorry, we'll put you down. And he's like, no, I support the struggle, and you've had a hard time. This is on the back heels of Onslaught, right? Where now mutants are enemy number 1. Xavier's gone missing, so there's this little moment of just, like, Christmas. They're giving a little bit of that joy to the world. And then, for no reason but just for fun, there's a page of, I would imagine this is the specific editor for this book, right? Not the X-Men editor. So who's editing this comic? Is it Steve? I can't see. On my page, I can't read the credits. But whoever appears here in the office is one of the editors. It's not going to be maybe the lead editor.
It's just Bob. It's just Bob Harris, because Steve.
Is that Bob?
Yeah, because Steve Buccellato is the colorist, and Richard Starkings obviously is the letterer. And then it's not Townsend or Madureira or Lobdell, so really it's only Harris.
But this is in the day when they didn't give us. Because wait, isn't Bob? Bob is editor in chief?
No, not yet.
So he's the X-Men editor.
He's the X-Men editor. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess this is Bob Harris, and there's a cute moment of, like, the buggy flying, because Magneto, Joseph, is levitating the buggy in the air, and it flies past, of course, the Marvel offices, because it's, like, 387 Park Avenue South, which, if you know. And he's complaining about Scott and Joe haven't started the next issue, and he's working Christmas Eve or whatever, and then he realizes it's time to go home, and he works too hard. So there's a nice little nod there, maybe to their editor, that either he's hounding them too much or he works too hard. Nice little Christmas message. And yeah, so, like, I don't know much about Cannonball at this point, right? He's not in the X-Men animated series. I did not read New Mutants. I didn't read X-Force. So for me, this is, his time in the X-Men is, like, this is my Cannonball. And to see someone who kind of is still forming his powers, doubts himself to some extent, going up against a guy whose literal power is his confidence. Lots of fun kinetic energy from Joe Mad, uncertainty about what's going to happen. And he beats him, which is a fun thing. And now I'm on the page with the Xenox chamber, which is a great callback. This is Lobdell kind of digging into some deep cuts from X-Men lore and deciding that he's going to kiss Rogue, to find a way to basically have a kiss prophylactic, that he can kiss her and she can feel it, but he'll block her mind from connecting with her body. I don't know. I mean, it might be a little bit... is fun the right word? If he had taken a Magneto helmet and messed around with the Magneto helmet and kind of flipped it inside so that it wasn't just blocking outside brains, but like it blocked Rogue's brain on the inside, and then putting a Magneto helmet on her and then kissing her in his own helmet, would that have been like... That's the kind of thing that Claremont would do. Right? It's kind of like a weird psychosexual, like kissing himself thing that like isn't here. It's a little odd that such a gigantic Xenox chamber is floating above. Where was Joseph holding that thing? Was it just like in a back alley the whole time, trying to hide it from her? The World Trade, when they go up to the World Trade Center, it's a very sweet kiss. It's a very tender moment. It's meaningful in that way. And then we get the resolution of the fight. And one of my favorite moments in X-Men comics, Cannonball is able to absorb a punch that Gladiator says intended to send him into the center of the sun. And when it resolves, he doubles down on this. It wasn't just hyperbole. He says, that was my most powerful blow. So Gladiator has come to Earth to seek the aid of the X-Men. And he thought in order to do that, he's going to obliterate a teenager. That was his plan. Like, he was going to paste him. He would just be a miss if it wasn't for this force field that, Sam decided he could generate around himself in that moment. And then they explain the physics of this. Beast will explain it on the following page. And Gambit will call it the coup de grace, when he double hammer fists Gladiator into a construction site. And then we get the explanation, and everyone arrives, and they're all like, hey, look, we're X-Men, and you shouldn't do this. And then they're just like, hey, I'm Gladiator, and you got to go do a mission. I'm going to send the 6 of you with orbs to Shi'ar space, because there's a threat that is greater than any we've faced before. Cannonball, you can't go. You're too young. It's a threat to you. It would be a problem. But this reporter in the back, this normal human reporter, she can go. As far as I know, you're all humans. You all look the same to me anyway. I guess you're all X-Men. You get an orb, and then they're gone. And
right?
set up the storyline.
Yeah, the guy who just schooled me and observed my best punch can't go because he can't solve this. Right?
Yeah,
Currently,
I've actually beat all of you before, except the reporter and this team, and I'm going to pick her.
Yeah.
Anyway, I love this issue. It's silly.
What I think artistically is interesting is that in the early 90s, everyone was adding extra lines. So much extra line work to everything. And then Joe Mad here really strips it down. And that's part of the elegance of some of these characters that you're talking about and some of these interactions, is that, like, on the faces, he's really not using a lot of extra lines at all. He's being very judicious in his use of line work. And so that simplicity in line is really giving the characters a very different look. So, in that first page that you mentioned, where everyone's kind of, it's the first Christmas page, you got the tree behind them, like, very elegant looks. Like, you don't have, like, Sam has a few lines. Like, it's such simple line work. It's very judicious, and it makes everyone look younger and sexier. Like, it's not what we saw just a few years before. It's fascinating how close this is to do two different things. If you go 4 years in the future, you've got Quietly doing New X-Men, and 4 years in the past, and you're coming out of Jim Lee, and you've got Andy Cooper doing extreme line work. So it's fascinating to see that this is the intersection, or the midway point between them, and it's so different from what you're going to see 3 years later and 3 years after.
Yeah, there's almost, especially in the zoom outs, when Matt has enough time to really kind of let himself go. It's an interesting point. It's a good point about the line work and the simplicity of it. When you get really far back, the manga aesthetic almost starts to kind of go away, especially like with Cannonball and maybe to some extent with Rogue and so on. It's almost like it's so fine. Like Winsor McKay is one of my favorite comic artists, and he is a very, very fine line. And the inking here from Townsend kind of captures almost little elements of that. Like, 'cause a lot of Winsor McKay stuff, and also with like the Yellow Kid, a lot of shots of like New York as well. Like those artists in that kind of golden era of comics. Very, very, very fine line work and lots of detail crammed in. And Madureira will not be able to keep this up, or he'll just kind of, I suppose, evolve or change. And the lines will get thicker and darker and heavier as he finishes his tenure with like 350 and moves on to like Battle Chasers. There's a lot of thick black lines in that. But yeah, for now, it is. You're right. It is almost the antithesis of the heavy rendering that the Claremont brothers are bringing in, right, from their dad, and also certainly doing a little bit of chasing of like Silvestri and Lee, you know, in what they're doing, but they're doing it in their own thing. It's a nice observation.
It's interesting. The woman who works at FAO Schwartz is gorgeous, but he didn't need to make her this gorgeous. Like but everyone is gorgeous.
Sam's a hot number too, so I suppose. But yeah, you're right. Like she must be modeling to the side, right?
But
and
like he doesn't know how to make unattractive people. They're all gorgeous here. Like it's just
it's a little excessive. Isn't
like it? Yeah,
even the Punisher's a hottie.
Yeah, well, I was going to get to that, but yeah, everyone's a smoke show. So the Punisher's appearance here. As a kid, I don't think I clocked it when it first happened. I remember seeing in the letters pages people being like, "Hold up, is that Punisher?" And everyone's like, "Yeah, it is." And so, like, did you know right from the beginning? Did you already know from when you were younger? Like, how ingrained in it was this to you that you knew it was Punisher right away?
I was pretty proud of myself for noticing that. Yeah, I mean, he has the skull on the side of his jacket, and then if you look carefully, you can see the Punisher thing there. Absolutely very Garrison, too. Like, you'll see Garrison's, like, the jaw and the haircut is Garrison from Battle Chasers. So that's interesting to notice later on. But yeah, I was very proud of myself for that. I mean, other cameos were more overt, and that was kind of one of the things that I said that drew me into Marvel Comics. There's a jury issue, isn't it? One of the issues of the jury with Bagley's art and Thor flies overhead, as I recall. I remember thinking that was remarkable. And I don't remember the issue number. Was it 2, maybe 3? Maybe issue 2 of the Green Goblin. McDaniel with the Human Torch blasting. I still love that issue of Johnny blasting out of a sewer. And
it's gorgeous.
Phil just kind of going like, yeah, it's a great image. And then Phil's reaction to that, he's like, oh man, he must get all the chicks. He's super cool. Like, I got to be like that. Like, those moments really captivated me. And then to have, I'm sorry, I'm going to talk about Green Goblin for just 2 seconds, right? All these great guest stars of like Scarlet Spider, Daredevil, just popping up constantly. That shared DeFalco sense of the universe. DeFalco's great at New York and shared universe stuff.
One thing I want to mention, because you did mention it, the fact that, or maybe it was Paul, no, I think it was you, that when Gladiator shows up, we see a teleportation effect we've never seen. These globes, we've never seen them. These orbs, we'll never see these again. Like, it's just interesting. They're just throwing shit out there, and it looks cool, so you kind of go with it. But when you really think about it, you're like, they're just making shit up. Like, it's just, I mean, it's all made up anyway. We all know that. But I mean, there's an internal logic to the world typically, and they're just throwing stuff around because it looks cool. And like, they even talk about how the Imperial Guard is already on Earth because, you know, they have their own quest. But then, like, how did he get ported over then? Like, what is going on? Like, there's a lot of, if you really think about it, you're like, there's so many questions. And Nate, you brought up a lot. Like, he's looking for the X-Men. I'm going to beat the shit out of this teenager first. Like, what is happening? But also it looks cool, so who cares, right? Like, it's interesting how much of it you can just let slide because it's a fun, enjoyable, fast-paced issue with some good character beats thrown in for fun.
I thought the same thing.
You hide a lot with good art and good action, right? It doesn't have to make sense if it's just, it looks great and it feels like a ton of fun. Like, and this is also their way of, okay, we're trying to make Cannonball legit, right? So how do we make Cannonball legit? Let's have him fight Gladiator, right? And go toe-to-toe with, you know, a guy who can toss a juggernaut across, you know, the ocean, right? And show, you know, this guy's got more power than he's worth. And not to correct you, Nate, you mentioned earlier that Cannonball was not the animated series. He's terribly in a really bad episode in the last season of the animated series that, don't ever watch it, but if you there.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough. I had no memory of him being there.
Okay, because it's a terrible episode. You wiped it from your memory. It's a wise choice.
And I think when this issue came out, that wouldn't have happened yet either. So to be fair to Nate, there's no way he would have known that yet. But you're right. That's a really bad episode.
Yeah.
My first memory of Cannonball is in Wolverine. So it's an Adam Kubert. It might even be Along Came the Juggernaut. It might even be that issue. And then he's here. So to me, like he's just an X-Men character who one of the several that I don't recall soon or being a big deal. But yeah, like to your point too, Adam, about like Joe Mad just being given the keys. Because again, at this point, like he's the premier artist. He's been drawing the book for a while now, and he drew the Phalanx for the Phalanx Covenant. And then now they apparently just told him, or he asked, I don't want to draw that anymore. I'm going to draw whatever I want to draw. And they're like, okay, redesign the Phalanx. And it came to the point where they had to do a whole explanation that even Hickman would eventually have to pick up on to explain why there are two different versions of the Phalanx that look almost nothing alike. And then when you start cutting the ones with the six eyes that would later show up Annihilation and then be connected to Ultron and his Annihilation, when you cut them in half, they got the yellow fiddly bits inside that you're used to with Warlock and the Technarchy, and they're like, the Technarchy are this, and the Phalanx are that, and they're like, kind of each other, and then Hickman just does what he does years later with House of X and Powers of 10, and he's like, I'm just going to explain that. And you're like, did anyone need that? That kind of really starts getting more complicated here, because Matt apparently just wanted to draw what he wanted to draw, and Lobdell was like, okay, and Harris was like, okay, the book is selling, right? So...
Now, it's interesting. So, looking at these 5 books, which one do you think is the highest on the Christmas meter? So, one feeling like it has the Christmas spirit. Nate, I'll let you go first.
I mean, I'm looking at the McFarlane one. I mean, that one really... I would say that one is a big one. The McFarlane issue, Christmas trees, Christmas dinners... Christmas meals, bah humbugs. Yeah, I would probably score the McFarlane issue the highest for Christmas.
Paul, what do you think?
I would mostly agree with that. With Double D bringing up a close second there as well, just given a lot of the right beats and the family wholesomeness, and you know. He's carrying a chair over his shoulder. He's there to give a loving cheer.
So which one would you say is the most incidental, accidentally Christmas? Not really. Like, would you put Uncanny X-Men at the bottom here? Because it's
Claremont's, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. At least Christmas, yeah. Not even a debate.
For me, because of the Black Christmas thing, and there are so many horror movies that are Christmas horror movies that also have come about since then, I put that slightly above the bottom. I actually might even put X-Men. No, you know what? I might even put the Uncanny 341. It doesn't need to. Besides Sam shopping for a gift,
and the Rockefeller Center big tree. Yeah, there's not much else.
Like. Joseph could put the moves on Rogue anytime. He doesn't need Christmas to do it. In fact, he doesn't even say Merry Christmas. He's just like, I want to jump your bones. You can be kissed now. If you pick me over Remy, I can give you what he can't give you. I mean, this might even be part of the inspiration for what happens in X-Men 97, for all we know. Because, the creator is a big X-Men fan and knows his stuff, right? So, Bo DeMeo. I would say, even though I love 341, I would maybe even put... There's just something about that demon issue that I agree. Almost objectively, it's not, but there's a tradition there of the slasher at Christmas, and so I kind of rank that a little bit higher. But yeah, it is low. I would say Uncanny 341 and the Claremont Uncanny, whose the issue numbers escape me right now, are probably at the bottom for me.
143. So I guess when... This is an open question for both of you as well. So you read all these issues in isolation, and obviously some of them more than others are really part and parcel of like what was going on in the ongoing narrative of their books. So which of these issues, when you were finished, were like, I want to read more of this before I read anything else? Like, which one most made you feel like, I want to know what happens in the next issue?
I think I mentioned already that the Daredevil one was probably the one that kind of intrigued me the most, but only because I hadn't read it before, right? I could probably say the same for X-Men 341, because you just got blessed into Shi'ar space. What's going to go on there? But obviously, I was also collecting X-Men at that time, post-Onslaught. I remember buying the issues off the rack, and I don't have that trade. But I remember the Charlotte Gambit, like all the issues that were in there, flipping through the rest of that trade after reading the one issue, and you can say, oh yeah, fond memories of the art and that storyline and stuff like that. So I already kind of knew what happened. I wouldn't say that, but if I read it for the first time, then yes, I would lump that in with wanting to know more, because the rest of them were mostly kind of one and done situations, right? Nothing came out of the X-Men issue that you need to read more. And the Claremont issue was kind of just just a one and done as well. So I'll give Daredevil the nod there.
Did the Michelinie issue of Amazing Spider-Man make you want to go back and find out more about Mary Jane's abuser and kidnapper and stalker? No? Yeah, no one feels that way.
Well, for me, my answer is Amazing 314.
Interesting.
Because I've read all these issues before, and upon rereading them, and also I'm already reading through the Nocenti Daredevil, and I read past 143 for Claremont because I just got my epic for God Loves, Man Kills. So that's kind of where I am in my X-Men read or reread. And Uncanny 341, I've already read this era. This is when I first started collecting. So, like, for me, it's a process of elimination between the Amazing Spider-Mans. And for me, I've already said I'm interested in reading the McFarlane era. I just haven't started yet. And 314 ends with Next Venom, right? Venom returns. So there's Hydro Man and Venom. I figure that might be enough to even tickle your fancy, Paul. Wet your whistle with some images of Venom, of early Venom stuff. So I would hope that would maybe make you interested.
So McFarlane Venom with those blue feet. Classic.
No, I picked these 5, obviously, because I knew they took place in and around Christmas time, and they were, to some degree, Christmassy. Were there any issues that you remembered that were particularly Christmassy that we didn't talk about that you want to mention or that you want to give a shout-out to?
I'm not ready for this question.
This was a spontaneous question. I mean, there were some obvious ones for me from the last few years, not last few years, I guess of the last couple decades. They'll put out Christmas specials. So I remember one in particular I really liked, which was I think around 2004 or 5 by Dan Slott, which was the GL Xmas special, which was the Great Lakes Avengers, and they had a Christmas special, and it was a lot of fun. Some interesting stories in there. Some were very serious, some were really silly. So that would be one of mine, but kind of steered away from that type of stuff. I was more interested in ongoing issues that ended up going in a Christmassy route. One thing I showed Paul on the weekend, which I'm glad we didn't talk about, was an issue of Incredible Hulk, which is the issue after Hulk gets turned into Professor Hulk. The next issue is a flashback to Grey Hulk fighting against Santa Claus, and it's not good. The art looks all over the place, so I'm glad we didn't talk about that, but that was definitely one of the ones where I was like, okay, well, I know this takes place around Christmas. Maybe we should talk about this. I'm glad we didn't. Any others you know of, Nate?
I'm just kind of trying to jog my memory. X-Men 98, a Cockrum Claremont issue in early Claremont days. That's memorable. I remember that one, and they have the opening splash of everybody, gathered around, again, downtown for shopping, Manhattan, not just downtown. Also with the big tree, Rockefeller Center. So that's, I guess, the first time that Claremont's doing that. So that's a memorable one.
Yeah. It's interesting, as a kid, I wouldn't have known that the Joe Mad one was essentially an homage to that. But once you know, and it's really hard to not see it. A couple years ago, they put out a new version of Marvels by Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross, and it had a new, I don't know if it was a prologue or an epilogue or what it was, but there was a couple new pages, and it was of that moment in X-Men 98, where the X-Men are there, and then the Sentinels show up, and Phil Sheldon is there and experiences that moment. It was just a quick little, I think maybe 10 pages, but it was a fun little story in and around that period.
there's like I feel like there's like I have a faint memory, and this is a very faint memory of is there not a Wolverine Spider-Man issue with Christmas being in the background at the very least, or is that's like a childhood memory, so that's not a lot to go on.
I mean, it's possible. Not that I can think of, but it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Yeah, fair enough. So that's, I guess, 98 for me is the one that trying to jog my memory. I think there's a Moon Knight one again I'm not thinking of, but no, I mean, the 341 is like the big one for me. That's like number one with a bullet for Christmas stuff.
For sure.
Uncanny 143 is a recent, in the last few years, issue that I've enjoyed. So those are my big two, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So next month when we do Book of the Month Club, we'll be hopefully coming back to the Clone Saga. But the following month will be in February. So are you guys up for any Valentine's issues? Any love issues? We want to talk about some weddings. I could just make Paul read Spider-Man Blue. I mean, I could do many things. Or do we just...
He should. Yes, that's at least two Spider-Man.
Have you read Spider-Man Blue, Paul?
I don't believe so.
Oof. Okay. Well, I'm going to be hard pressed not to make you read that.
You're going to be a changed man, Paul.
You'll be very changed. Okay. It's interesting because Spider-Man Blue is obviously one of the color books, and there was three others. There's Hulk Gray, Captain America White, and Daredevil Yellow. But the first two, especially, are very much love stories. Sad love stories because they're both two people who are dead. Talking about how they fell in love with that particular person. But that would be an interesting one to do for Valentine's Day. Or I could just make you guys read a lot of different comic book weddings because there's many of those. So I'll have to get my thinking cap on and think of a good...
Or we could read... Yeah?
No, go ahead, Nate. You seem so excited.
We could read some romance comics. Or Romance Redux. Or Redo. That's fun. Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely possible, too. I like doing these Book of the Month Club where we do something a little bit thematic. I enjoyed our Canada Day one last year, or this year, I should say, because we got to do some Alpha Flight stuff. More than anything, I like coming up with something that Paul's never read before and seeing what Paul thinks about it, because he's like an interesting test case, because I've read too much, and Nate's also read a lot, but... Paul, we keep finding fertile ground, stuff that you haven't read.
There's tons of stuff I haven't read. Tons. It's ridiculous.
That's why it's exciting.
Is there a Smoochy Power Rangers series we could read, or issues, or something Transformers? Are there any romance G.I. Joe issues or something? Or what's a wheelhouse for... Or there's got to be a Star Wars Smoochy comic somewhere, right? There's got to be some kind of romance there.
We just want some smoochies.
But let's have some weird courtship of Princess Leia adaptation. I don't know, man.
Gotta be.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you guys so much to come back for a Book of the Month Club. I really enjoyed talking about these issues, especially, to make Paul read stuff he's never read before. I'm really excited to hear him say positive things about JRJR. It doesn't happen very often, so that was very exciting. So thanks again so much to both of you. For those listening, you can email us at comicshenanigans@gmail.com. Rate the show on Apple Podcasts. Listen to us on Apple Podcasts, and also listen to us on Spotify. Next month, we hopefully will be going back to the Clone Saga, talking about some of my favorite stuff from the Clone Saga, which is Spider-Man The Lost Years, which is an absolutely amazing miniseries by John Romita Jr., and J.M. DeMatteis. So it's a really good read. So hopefully we'll be talking about that next month. But thanks again. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to everybody. Happy New Year. And we'll be back with new Book of the Month Club in January 2025. Enjoy. Bye-bye.